Hello and welcome. I am Scarperlock, and this is City of Heroes on the Rebirth server. We are with Quintessence Last, our level 20 brute who has 148,000 experience and only needs 6,000 to go to get to level 21. And our next two enhancement slots. And let's talk about, before we do our missions here, let's talk about what we're going to do with our enhancement slots. So looking at this, I've got, these are the base ones. So we've added 1, 2, and 5 is 7 and 2 is 9 on this side, and we've added only 5 on this side, so we're getting a little unbalanced. I like doing even builds, so we're going to need to put our next two slots on this side. And I think what we'll do is finish out energy protection, because that's a passive, so we can always run that. And then level 22, I don't know what we're going to get, we'll see. But for right now, we're talking to Agent G, and this is a guy I think I forgot to do with Silver Phoenix. And he says, "Greetings, Quintessence Lass. I'm Agent G. I'm glad you came. We first discovered that Arachnos was operating in fault line when it became apparent that something had driven out the Circle of Thorns. At first, we thought they were here to raid the old hero bases, just like the Sky Raiders. However, unlike the Sky Raiders, we soon noticed that their salvage operations were a cover for directed search. At first, we thought they might be attempting to recover Fault Line's earthquake machines, but with what I've learned following your work with Dr. Delilah Stein, I fear it's much worse. I believe that Arachnos is close to locating the Psychochronometron. I've done as much as I can covertly to stop them. Now I need an overt partner to finish this operation." So this is a Fault Line in the Sands of Time, and I believe this is the final story arc for Fault Line. He says, "We must know how much Arachnos has learned before we even know where to begin. So your first mission will be intelligence gathering. The Sky Raiders have recently captured several Arachnos codes. They've hidden those codes on several laptops while they attempt to crack them. For security, they've stashed this operation in our own backyard, thinking that we didn't know about it, so they can use us for protection. Since you are not a known Longbow agent, you could break up their operation and still leave them thinking that Longbow doesn't know what they're up to." Okay. So he says, "Go get the codes. And don't get caught, I guess." What do we got here? This is defense buffs. Hang on. We can move this up. Nice. Okay, so out we go, and this is where we go to the other side of the wall. And now we are going to get the stolen codes. I do believe I did this part of the storyline with Liberty Lass. And there's no music right now because for some reason in Fault Line it doesn't want to ever stop the repeating of the music. So we've just got the music turned off. When we get out of Fault Line, I'll turn it back on. I haven't had that bug anywhere else. So I don't know why it's doing it in Fault Line. Whatever, it's just an issue in some MP3 file or something. I don't know. Alright, we're going to keep our just first two toggles on. It's just going to be level 22 before we can actually turn this guy on. Because we need single origin damage, endurance reducers, and we also need single origins on stamina. Okay, Raider Engineer, we're going after you first, even though you're hiding back there, because otherwise you're going to try and summon something. You can see how quickly we build Fury. It's awesome. Having a great time with this character. We probably will get to level 21 today, right now in this episode. Another miss on Shadow Mall. We definitely want to get those single origins up there. And I hear a glowy. Raider Engineer. We punch you first. And there is a glowy nearby. Not sure where, but I hear it. Got him. We don't need all those greens. There it is. There's a laptop right there. So this should be one of the codes. So we've got the first set of Arachnos codes. I guess we'll go this way first. I'm not sure which way is shorter. Okay, these guys aren't engineers, so we'll just head in. So in the last episode, I was talking about how there is a whole big debate going on in D&D Beyond forum about changes that they're making in D&D to racial bonuses to things, and how some people really like it because it pretty much allows your character's race to be cosplay. That is, the human variant option was you take a feat and you get +2 in any one stat, and so you could put it in any stat you wanted. Most other races, other than I think half elves, could also move stats around because they were half elves and part human. Most other races got a specific stat bonus, like if you were an elf, you got, I don't know, intelligence and dexterity or something, and if you were a dwarf, you got, if you were a hail dwarf, you got +2 constitution and +1. I can't remember what else. Wisdom, maybe. I think. And, oh, well, that's not as useful if, say, you're going to be a rogue, as having plus dex and plus intelligence, because rogues need intelligence for their skills and dexterity for their, sneak attacks. And, yeah, but it's also nice to have constitution, and it's also nice to have those other stats, and you don't have to make up a dwarven rogue. And so, yeah, I mean, there are basically, the way the game works, encouraged essentially archetypes. The halfling rogue is very common because they happen to have stat bonuses that play in well to the rogue and so forth. And this is gonna suck. Nope, I missed him. So now we're gonna get the stupid force field generator. And there's nothing we can do but just get pounded on until we defeat... Oh, now we got 2 of them. Oh, that's just really bad. Now let's pull back. And just try to get them away from this stupid thing so that I don't want to grow another group. Can we get rid of this thing, please? There we go. Alright. Well, that was a big mistake. Aggroing all that at once. And that all started with a miss on the first guy. If I'd hit him, he would have been interrupted and we wouldn't have gotten the first one, and I wouldn't have had the rest of them. I wouldn't have had as much trouble with the rest of them, let's put it that way. So anyway, there are a lot of people who've been advocating for this, basically greater freedom of choosing your stats and not having to always have the dwarf have high constitution and high whatever strength or whatever it happens to be. And they want the greater freedom. They want the greater freedom, and they compare it to other games like Savage Worlds, where you don't have these kinds of racial bonuses that work quite the same way, and GURPS and some of these other games. Champions, although I'm the only one who ever talks about Champions. And so one of the players is like super loves this idea, huge advocate of it. It's the person who started the thread. And she's in there, basically flaming everybody who disagrees and prefers it the old way, and said, all you old timers who like it the old way, this is somebody who's only been playing D&D for a couple of years. Basically, this person found Dungeons & Dragons through probably Critical Role or something like it, and found Dungeons & Dragons essentially as a player of D&D Beyond, right? And a lot of people have, and there goes another Raider Engineer. Boy, these guys are aggroing from a long way. And so, basically all she knows is playing D&D on D&D Beyond, and doesn't know anything about, never played the older versions of D&D, can't even imagine why someone might like Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as a game. Just doesn't even occur to her that somebody might want to play it that way, might prefer it that way, and anybody who prefers it that way is just an old-timer who doesn't understand good game design. Then come to find out, right, and it is we older folks, people who've been playing D&D since the 80s or 90s, who have complained about this and said, no, you're making the races essentially be like cosplaying. You're not being an orc. If your orc isn't evil and your orc doesn't have the orc attributes and the orc culture, and you're just acting like a normal human with the skin and tusks of an orc, then you're basically doing orc cosplay. You're not actually playing an orc that's, evil and brutal and nasty the way the orc culture is supposed to be. And and a lot of these folks argue from the viewpoint of the culture, but what they really want is the ability to min-max. And here comes another guy, right? Another shield guy. No, we stopped it. And one of the other guys who I actually am not a fan of, but he pretty much called them out because he highlighted like 3 or 4 of them were talking about the bonus and being able to put the bonus where it's best for your character. And he said, well, okay, let's be honest about what we're talking about here. You're not talking about culture, race, racism, or any of that. And I'm dying on endurance because I keep forgetting to switch to combat jumping. He said, what you really want is to be able to min-max. And you don't like that the original game didn't let you min-max that much. So now we got a boss here, so you have to be careful. And I think I'm going to pull, even though it's going to pull out a shield generator. Because, yeah, there goes the shield generator. Because we need to get these guys out here and away from the jump bot. I don't want the shield generator on the jump bot and protecting it. That would just suck. So anyway, as the conversation went on, this one person who's been one of the biggest advocates for doing it this new way, it's so much better, and criticizing us as being the old timers and stuff, like literally admitted on the forum that she doesn't even like D&D. That she actually prefers GURPS or Suede, Savage Worlds, which she calls GURPS Light. She actually much prefers those two games. She thinks they're way better. We're going to fight this jump bot, of course. She thinks they're way better. She likes them better. She would rather play them. And the only reason she's playing D&D is because D&D Beyond is a really good online version of the game. And GURPS basically doesn't have anything like that. And she said, neither does Savage Worlds. So I said, well, wait a minute. Savage Worlds has Fantasy Grounds. You can play Savage Worlds on Fantasy Grounds. And you can play Savage Worlds on Foundry now. I actually bought the module for it. It's $10. And it's got the whole book. And so she was like, really? So she seems maybe potentially interested in this, but here we have, and this is the problem that I think many of us have with this, what they're doing with D&D right now, is they're trying to appeal to, they're changing D&D to please people who don't actually even like Dungeons & Dragons. This person admitted she literally does not like D&D. She much prefers Savage Worlds, but she'd rather use the D&D Beyond online interface stuff. And so, and now I gotta fight this stupid shield thing. This is super annoying. I hate these things. Alright, we got it. We should be alright now. Let's go ahead and do Dark Consumption. Come on. There we go. That's what I like to see. Get all our endurance back. That's gonna be awesome once we have it recharging. And kill the jump bot. Got him. He does explode, but we had enough health for that. Well, there's a lot more guys to arrest, so let's go ahead and do that. I don't think we're going to level up from this, but... Okay, this is the only Raider Engineer, so let's hit him and hit him hard. So yeah, I mean, the thing is, Dungeons & Dragons, as a company, Wizards of the Coast, they've already done this once. They've already done it in 4th edition. With 4th edition D&D, they basically tried to build an edition of D&D that would appeal to all the people who don't like D&D. And it bombed. It was terrible. Nobody liked it. The D&D players hated it, and it didn't appeal to the people who didn't like D&D. And I think fundamentally the same thing is potentially going to happen here. A lot of people are saying this is equivalent to 5.5 edition, right? Like that, as if there's a new addition to it now, and it kind of is, because it's completely changing the way character creation and racial creations and stuff work. And it's not pleasing most of the people who already like D&D. Most of us had no problem with races as they were defined and implemented in Dungeons & Dragons. It's all the people who've never played D&D before who don't like it, because they don't understand it, right? They see the word race, and because they don't know anything about the lineage of D&D, they actually think that race has to do with human races, as we call them, and racism. And that when you make a single race that is sort of generically, automatically, as it were, evil, like the orcs, it's essentially agreeing with Nazis that some races are like worth killing or what have you. And that's obviously not what D&D is saying about human races. It's only what they're saying about orcs. But if you don't know that history and the lineage of the game and you don't understand it, I mean, this one person, I mean, obviously she does understand it. She knows that it's based on Tolkien and stuff, but she thinks Tolkien sucks and Middle Earth sucks and the Forgotten Realms suck. Well, I agree with her about that. And anybody who likes them is just an old schooler who needs to be taught that D&D shouldn't be about Tolkien and Tolkien-like fantasy. And of course, it isn't. It's actually about more Conan-style sword and sorcery fantasy and Vancian magic. But it is related because Tolkien and Vance and Howard and these other people got their ideas from the actual Earth legends, and so the elves of D&D and the dwarves of D&D are like the dwarves and elves of real Norse and Celtic legends. And so, yeah, you can say, well, our dwarves in new D&D are, dexterous, nimble, non-hardy, non-taciturn, non-stocky guys, but then you're just making up some new random race. You're not implementing a set of characteristics that are based on actual mythology from the world. So I think a lot of these people don't care about the lineage. They just come into it now. Here's what it's like now. We don't like how it is now. We don't care why it's like the way it is, and we want to change it into something else. And the thing is, if something else already exists, go play Savage Worlds. Why change D&D into Savage Worlds when Savage Worlds is already there? GURPS is already there. I think it was very, very clear that several of the most vocal people who are in favor of these new changes really don't like D&D. And it's telling to me that the people who love D&D enough to have been playing it for decades, or maybe started playing it years ago and came back to it like I have, people who have a love for the hobby and for D&D itself, are advocating keeping it the way it is, and people who hate D&D are talking about how great these changes are. Like, that's bad. That's a bad idea. It's sort of like when all the people who hated Star Wars, the original Star Wars, thought the Last Jedi was great. Well, that means you're not appealing to Star Wars fans, because the Star Wars fans mostly didn't like it. And that's why those last two movies did not earn the amount of money that Disney and Lucasfilms expected them to earn. And I don't want to get into that, but my point is, if you make something that's been around for years change wildly to be liked by the people who hated the original, then you've got something that's not the original. There's no question about it, and there's no surprise that the OSR, or the old school revival movement, has exploded in the last couple of years, maybe the last 5 to 7 years, and it's really exploded in the last couple because people are like, no, I want to go back and play my old school AD&D or something very similar. And since AD&D is no longer supported by Wizards of the Coast, they turn to the old school revival games. And I'm probably going to think about turning to some of those too. Again, the issue is, yeah, there isn't a lot of online support for them, but I'd rather kludge something together than play 5th edition if it's going to go sailing off in a direction that I don't like. So I'm stuck with it for this campaign, but I don't think I'm going to DM in 5th edition again. Anyway, he says, excellent work. With this information, we can prepare the next phase of the operation. And then he says, with the codes you recovered from the Sky Raiders, we can now access Arachnos Network. There should be a great deal of information that should tell us just how close Arachnos is to finding the psychochronometron. Wow, what a word that is. It's really cool, though. However, to do that, you'll need to enter an Arachnos base and access their computers. Yeah, we can do that. I mean, look at City of Heroes, right? The game is, fundamentally the same as it was when it launched. I mean, in terms of the way it plays, right? And imagine now if they said, we're going to get rid of archetypes. We're going to get rid of we're going to bring in a global cooldown, which this game doesn't have. We're going to get rid of inspirations and replace them with potions that you can mix as if you were an alchemist. And you're going to have all these fantasy type things. It's sort of like make it like World of Warcraft, and like not just the auction house, but actually make it World of Warcraft. Um, what good does that do? The Star Wars Galaxies actually did this, right? The Star Wars Galaxies team saw the success of World of Warcraft. They were embarrassed by it. To be honest, they were embarrassed. And why were they embarrassed? Okay, they were embarrassed because they had Star Wars as an intellectual property, the greatest intellectual property, the most profitable intellectual property in the world, other than maybe Disney. And all they could get as an audience was about 300,000 subscribers. Now, 300,000 was a respectable number of subscribers at the time Star Wars Galaxies launched, but it never got any bigger than that. And by 2005, after it had been out for about a year and a half, World of Warcraft came out, and they got like 1 million subscribers right early off the bat. And this was kind of an embarrassment for LucasArts and Sony Online Entertainment. I almost forgot to switch to combat jumping again. Because there's no way that a game whose only fan base came from gamers should have done better than a game whose fan base was Star Wars. There were way more Star Wars fans in the world than there were Blizzard fans. There's just no comparison. Gamers are niche, and Star Wars was mainstream at the time. Huge, tens, hundreds of times more fans, and yet they didn't have that many. They didn't have that many subscriptions compared to World of Warcraft. And they were losing accounts. I mean, their accounts had gone down to like 150,000 while World of Warcraft was exploding. And so this was a huge embarrassment, and they wanted to make more money. And so what they did was they looked at basically how World of Warcraft worked with the global cooldown, with a lot of other things that they had going. And they basically tried to, as one of our guild leaders said, wow it up, World of Warcraftify it. They literally did this. They completely revamped the game. They took everything out of the game that had made it unique and loved by the people who were still playing it. And we've leveled up, guys. We are level 21. So the original game had 33 or 4 professions, and you leveled up your skills individually by using the skill that the skill box was pertained to. And there were 16 skill boxes, and you didn't have a character level. Not really. You just had what a skill level you had with your profession, and you could master 2 or 3 professions depending on whether they were top or base tier professions, elite or base professions. And you had entertainers who could heal battle fatigue, and you had doctors who could heal body wounds, and entertainers could heal mind wounds, and that's how the game played, and it was completely different from most other MMOs at the time, and very different from World of Warcraft, which basically had armor class and hit points, and they didn't have wounds, like mind wounds and stuff. So, who's talking over here? Is it a boss? No, it's just some guys. So, what Star Wars Galaxies did, what Sony Online Entertainment did, is they made all these changes. They went from 33 professions down to like 9. They had character levels, like 1 to 80 or something, and they had hit points, and they didn't have mind wounds anymore, and entertainers were still in the game as a class, but they had no function, essentially. There weren't any mind wounds, they couldn't heal you, there was no battle fatigue. People did not want to have to go to a cantina, supposedly, and get their minds healed and their battle fatigue healed. And there's a glowy here somewhere. It's a good thing we didn't go straight down the elevator, or up. And so they decided, all right, we're going to take this stuff out of the game. And they made entertainers functionally irrelevant, which made me quit the game. They went from hovering in the 120 to 130,000 regular subscribers and not being able to grow, down to something like 50,000 subscribers in the period of a couple months. They made the game much more approachable and likable by people who had hated Star Wars Galaxies in the first place. And they ruined everything about Star Wars Galaxies that the people who loved it loved. And this is almost exactly what's going on with D&D right now. And I don't know why, because D&D is the most popular game of all tabletop role-playing games. Like, probably more people play just D&D than play all the other pen and paper tabletop role-playing games combined. Champions, GURPS, Savage Worlds, Call of Cthulhu, Gumshoe, Iron Sworn, Apocalypse World, Dungeon World, you name them all. Dungeon Crawl Classics, Lion and Dragon, all of them combined probably do not sell as many books as D&D by itself. So I don't know why Wizards is feeling so apparently desperate about this. But it seems like they're trying to change D&D to make it more appealing to people who don't even like D&D. And one person said they're trying to like appease the Twitterites, and got banned for saying it, by the way, which makes me think it's true. Because why would you ban somebody for telling a lie? And I think that to some degree this is true. I think that they're very, very concerned, not just with Twitter, but with how the game is perceived and talked about on social media. And a lot of the people who talk about the game on social media don't play it. Maybe they watch something like Critical Role. They don't actually play the game. They haven't bought any of the books. They haven't actually read anything. They know, like this one person who prefers Savage Worlds and GURPS, very little about the history of the game, or maybe they know about it, but they didn't live it and they don't care about it. And all they know is what it says in the rules, and that it uses the word race, and then implies that people of a certain race have a particular genetically predisposed disposition to something, and they think that's racism, even though it has nothing to do with racism, because it's not on Earth, and it's not human races. All the human races are identical in this game. All of them they get the same stats. I mean, theoretically, people who are worried about real-world racism should applaud that, because whatever your human ethnicity is doesn't matter in D&D. They're all the same, right? So that should be what we want. And instead, they're upset because orcs are a little different from humans, and they're sort of genetically different from humans, and somehow that's a problem. And it's only a problem, or primarily a problem, to people who essentially don't play D&D or hardly play D&D at all, and many of them don't even like it, and they're never going to like it, and they're never going to be the main customers. They're not the people who pay the big money to buy every book when it first comes out. That's the old hardcore D&D fans. And again, this is the same thing that happened to 4th edition. They were trying to appeal to people who didn't like the crunchy 3rd edition version, and they said, let's try to make more of a, almost like a Champions game where there were powers and stuff like this, and it did not appeal to the primarily old school D&D players. A few of them liked it. I know Matt Colville has a huge amount of affection for 4th edition. And I think Jim Murphy as well was a big fan of 4th edition, but they liked it because it was very tactical, and it was designed around the idea of the battle map, which they use all the time, right? But if you're not really into the tactical play, that wouldn't appeal to you. And even people who were into the tactical play didn't really like the way characters and races and stuff were designed, because again, it was made, most people would say, and I think this is probably true, although I didn't play 4th edition, it was kind of designed like a video game, like this. And there's nothing wrong with City of Heroes, but it's a video game. It's not a tabletop game, and it's not meant to be played on tabletop with pencil and paper. It's meant to be played on a video game with a computer, right? And so you can't just convert. You can't just take what this character does in the video game and put it onto pencil and paper and think it's going to work. It pretty much won't. You're trying to keep track of recharge times and everything. It wouldn't work. You have to do something different in pencil and paper. And unfortunately, I think that 4th edition was, kind of too video gamey. And I think that there are probably a lot of the people who don't like current 5th edition and the things about 5th edition they don't like. I strongly suspect that if they just played 4th edition, they would actually love it, because I think a lot of the things that they don't like about 5th edition, which are the restrictions that were put on races and classes, that because they, this happened because D&D realized that, people at Wizards of the Coast realized they had screwed up, and they decided to try and make 5th edition go back to be more like the original. 5th edition is more like 1st edition D&D than 3rd was. So, I mean, 2nd obviously was almost exactly like 1st edition, but 3rd was very different. And 5th edition, conceptually, right, spiritually, essentially, is the successor to 1st edition, much more so than 3rd was. And way more than 4th. So I think a lot of the people who are complaining about 5th edition would have probably just been happy to play 4th. But they never tried it. They came into 5th edition because of D&D Beyond or something, and so they never tried 4th. There isn't any way to play 4th online easily. Wizards of the Coast isn't going to roll out any websites or endorse anything that puts 4th edition out, because they want you to buy 5th now. Where is the last glowy? So, yeah, I wonder if some of these people would just be happier if they tried 4th edition, although from the one person's comment, well, she wouldn't be happier because there isn't any way to play online with her friends using like a virtual tabletop or what have you. Well, I think Foundry and Roll20, not Foundry, Foundry doesn't have it. I think Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds do have the older versions of D&D, and you can play them. Pretty sure in Fantasy Grounds you can play like 1st edition D&D if you want. You have to pay them for it, of course, but I think you can. Now, the really funny part was the same person who said that she wanted to do an online thing. When I told her there is a Fantasy Grounds and a Foundry module for Savage Worlds, and I've got the one, and she said, can you customize it? I was like, yeah. But she's kind of like, I don't like virtual tabletops. I'm like, how do you play online without a virtual tabletop and yet, quote unquote, have online tools? I mean, I know you could, right? When we started playing, I used PowerPoint and Zoom, and we used, pencil and paper character sheets, and rolled dice in our dice trays, and you totally could do that. You don't need a virtual tabletop. But she's saying, I need a virtual tabletop. I can't play without it, and yet she thinks virtual tabletops are, in her words, bananas. And I'm like, well, I don't know how you have online tools without a virtual tabletop. I guess D&D Beyond is what she's talking about, but D&D Beyond's not a virtual tabletop. So it almost sounds like what she's saying is, I want Savage World Beyond. And because I can't have it, I'm going to play D&D because I like the D&D Beyond website and how it works. And I want to change D&D to be how I like it, because I don't really like D&D, I just like their website. And it's really not even their website, it's Fandom's website. So, I don't know. Imagine somebody coming on here and trying to argue that this game should be more like Champions Online. That there should be this like build-up power where you gain energy. You shouldn't be spending endurance. You should be spending energy, and you should be building it up by using your base attack. And you should be able to freeform build your character, and you should be fighting Viper and things like that. Well, that's Champions. That's not City of Heroes. And Champions Online is a perfectly fine game for its own sake. But if you want to play Champions Online, play Champions Online. Don't make City of Heroes. Don't argue that City of Heroes should be more like Champions Online. Go play Champions Online. I mean, we don't want all the games to end up the same. We want them to be different so that people who have different tastes can play the game they like. Right? I have never, ever suggested, despite the fact that I think Champions in almost every way is a superior game in terms of mechanics and design to Dungeons and Dragons. In almost every possible way combat is way better. Character design is way better. I think it's not as good at giving you a fantasy experience, which is why if I'm playing a fantasy experience, I want to play D&D. But I would never argue that D&D should be designed to be like Champions. If I wanted to play Champions, I'd play it. So, and that doesn't mean that there aren't things that could be designed better in Dungeons and Dragons. Absolutely, there are, but I wouldn't want to change it to make it more like Champions. I would just want to make the actual gameplay of D&D that work a little better. And I think that a lot of these people, they don't really even like D&D, and so they're trying to change it into a game they would like. And I don't think that those folks should be the ones that the company's listening to, because I don't think they're ever going to be loyal. And I think literally at the first chance that these people get to do a Savage Worlds Beyond website, and you know, it's the first chance they get to have an online experience that's as good as the D&D online experience with one of these other games, they're going to jump ship because they don't actually like D&D. Anyway, that's enough of a rant about that. Let's see what he says. He says, excellent information, but it looks like we may already be too late. According to Arbiter Sam's report, they narrowed the Psychochronometron's final location down to 3 sites. We cannot allow them to cover that device. I've been clear to present you with a report containing a variety of worst-case scenarios should Arachnos receive that device. Study it. I want you to know what we could be fighting against. While you do that, I'll have this analyzed. It will help us find those 3 sites. So it looks like we're going to have 3 more sites to do. But first, that's not a leveler upper. First, we got to level up. And I think, actually, let's shortcut this. Let's go to Ouroboros. Going to head in. It's going to give us some sort of badge. It may give us a mission. I don't know. But we're just going to come right out here and go to, let's go to Talos. My favorite place, or one of my favorites. I'm torn between Talos and Founders Falls and Atlas Park. But I really love Talos Island. Oh wait, there's a badge up here somewhere. Let's just get it while we're here. I think. Somewhere around here. Where the heck is it? Oh well. Well, I'll get it another time. And we visit Luminary, my favorite leveler upper, because she's right by the train station. And we gain our next level, and we get, this is Resistance 2 on there. So what I like about this is we now have our, all of our defenses except Power Shield are finished. Because we don't need to put anything in Entropic Aura. So they're all finished. I mean, we might eventually put some extra endurance reducers on these guys. But for right now, 4 on these guys that are toggles, 3 on these guys, 1 on Entropic Aura. So we just need to add 3 slots to Power Shield. And the next thing we're going to do is start bumping up the rest of these guys. So at 23, we'll probably be doing that. In the meantime, we need to sell. But I will do that off screen. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you enjoyed my rant about Dungeons and Dragons. So I'm going to sell stuff. But until next time, I am Scrapperlock. And this has been City of Heroes on the Rebirth server.